Joining us now, Curtis Ellis. Curtis, Senior Policy Advisor for America First Policies. Curtis Ellis also served on the Trump campaign transition team, served in the Department of Labor. He's a man of many titles, and he's with us now. Curtis, great to have you.
Hey, it's great to be here. Quick question, John. You said you're going to be at the Vito session. What's Vito doing? I just saw Vito. I didn't know he was going to be in Virginia. I thought he was up in New York.
No, we got Vito out of New York because it's getting a little dangerous there for Vito. So he has to come down to God's country in Richmond, and we're going to be Vito's going to be with me at the Vito session.
That's right. He
Named
left
after
Staten
him.
Island after they knocked off that guy in the driveway. I got it. Yeah.
He's got. Oh, we shouldn't be laughing about that, but Vito has his own session named after him in the Richmond General Assembly.
Okay, good.
Then you know you've arisen. I mean, not only are you a Don, but when you get your own session named after you, Vito's session, it's pretty good, right?
Big deal. Yeah,
it's a big deal, especially if you're from Staten Island, right? Now, you're Vito from Staten Island. You got a whole day named after you in Virginia. That's pretty good, right? That means you made it, Vito. Good job, Vito, with the Vito session. All right, let's get to the border crisis. Okay, the mother of all caravans on the way. The president says, look, I might just shut this whole thing down. What do you think?
Well, that would be interesting. Shut the border down. That would certainly put pressure on Mexico to do something because Mexico depends on cross-border traffic. The legal cross-border traffic is a huge economic driver in Mexico. The question here is, when will Mexico and the Democrats admit that there's a crisis? We're expected to have 1 million people illegally come into the country across the southern border this year. 1 million, just this year. I mean, that's crazy. It's crazy talk. That's 100,000 this month, or last month, pardon me, in March. It's you cannot deny that this is a crisis, that this is out of control. Even Obama's director of Homeland Security says it's out of control. The Democrats clearly believe there should be no border, that everybody in the world should be allowed to come here and just come here. And how you can have a welfare state, how you can have Social Security and Medicaid and an open border, they haven't answered that yet. They just go with the sentimental narratives. They're not interested in facts. They're not interested in reality. They're not interested in practical solutions or practical consequences or as I say, objective reality. They're interested in sentimental narratives. Oh, well, we should welcome people, the huddled masses, the opportunity to make a better life, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't work. And if it takes closing the border to get some action here, a shock to the system like that, it's a wake-up call.
See, that's why I'm in favor of that, Curtis, for exactly that reason. I think you have to do something dramatic to bring attention to this, Curtis, and I don't think that's happening now. So, look, now, remember, we have the same Wall Street gloom and doom naysayers that said if we do a tariff, it's going to be economic Armageddon. If we don't sell a bushel of soybeans to the Chinese, that the whole U.S. farming system would collapse and we'd all starve. That if we canceled NAFTA, if we redid NAFTA, that our relations with Canada would suffer and that everybody would be put out of work in Wisconsin, right? All these calamitous predictions that Wall Street and Goldman Sachs made. Now they're saying, well, if you close the border even for a week, I mean, it's going to cause a recession. We're all going to be going to Venezuela and eating out of their food boxes. How do you respond to that?
We're all going to die. We're all going to, and before we die, it'll be a long, slow, painful death where we're eating out of garbage trucks before we die. At what point do we realize that these Goldman Sachs economic wizards are frauds? Every prediction they've made has been wrong. First of all, they never predicted the housing crunch. These are the people who came up with the brilliant idea of we're going to give mortgages to people who can't pay them, and then we're going to take those mortgages and package them and sell them as bonds to the whole world, and we'll crash the global economy. When Mildred and Maud in South Bend, Indiana, don't make their mortgage payment, we're going to leverage the entire world economy based on Mildred and Maud's ability. These are two part-time waitresses in South Bend, Indiana, by the way, on their ability to make a $5,000 a month mortgage payment. So these people are geniuses. Every prediction they've made is wrong. They have been operating as if it's 1954, and those are the assumptions they make on how the economy is supposed to work. And, I mean, they're completely out to lunch. You know, interesting about the border, back to the border, is the president cannot close the border between the ports of entry, right? The courts have told him you can't put up a wall, you can't put up a fence, you can't apprehend people as they cross the border illegally because somebody's feelings might get hurt, or God forbid they have a hangnail, they have to go to the emergency room, and you have to keep them there for 72 hours, then let them proceed on their way to Chicago or wherever they're going.
Right.
But he could reassign all of the border crossing guards from the ports of entry, right? There's people there at the ports of entry in Nogales, at Tijuana, at Mexicali, every place where there's nothing to stop him from reassigning those border guards to someplace else. And if there ain't no border guards there, the port of entry closes. It's that simple.
So, look, if he closes the border and closes the ports of entry, now, look, there's no question that's going to have some economic impact because of all the trade that goes on between Mexico, South America, U.S., both ways, because it gets closed both ways. You can't get in or out. So that's the ports of entry. But how does that stop illegals from just getting in a bus or a truck like they have, going down the dirt road an hour, getting off and just walking over the rope?
Well, it doesn't. It doesn't stop that at all. But what it is, it's a shock to Mexico. And maybe Mexico will do something about the fact that they are now expediting the transshipment of people from Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras through Mexico to our border. I mean, they know these buses filled with, and these caravans they're in Mexico illegally. Or else they're given a green light as, I wonder if they're given transit visas. Okay, Here's your transit visa. You can now go through the country. We'll let you in the country as long as we know you're leaving in 5 days. I mean, this is crazy. The Mexico is corrupt as all get out. The police work with the cartels, with the smugglers. So the whole thing is it's a circle of corruption. And, okay, that's the way you want to do it? Well, we're going to cut off. In addition to closing the border, what he also ought to do is close wire transfers to Mexico. Everybody here who's sending money back to grandma in Pueblo, it ought to be, I'm sorry, you can't make wire transfers back to Mexico. That's like closing the border as well. Do both, and you would see those people prick up their ears and wake up real fast down in Mexico City that we got to do something.
Well, look, I agree with the president here. Mexico is not doing anything really to stop this, not what they could do. And, we look, the laws, Curtis, as you know, there's three basic things driving this. You got the Dianne law, the Dianne Feinstein law that was passed a while back that basically says if you have a minor child, you cannot be deported with that child. So that's number one. The second thing is the Flores rule that says they can only be held for 20 days. So if you claim asylum and you read the little script, even though 90% of the initial claims for asylum, when they go in front of a hearing, they get rejected, right? But the problem is 70% of the people that get a piece of paper to go to the hearing never show up. So they're just released into the country. So we have these laws that protect people, and you're not going to get immigration reform now with the Democrats in there. So the president's hands are tied. I mean, you look at this crisis and you say, other than closing the border to get Mexico's attention because it's going to hurt them economically more than us, what do? You can't get anything passed in Congress. They want an open border situation. You can't build your wall. That window closed. They're not going to give you the money beyond, the 5 or 8 million you have. So you can't really do that. So the question becomes, what do you do?
I know, it's insane. The courts have taken away the ability to do anything. How do these courts come up with these decisions? Who empowered them to write our immigration laws? The laws are pretty clear. They give the president broad authority, but then the courts step in and they reinterpret the laws. As you said, the Flores decision, you got to release them within this time, and then you got that, you got to release them within that time, and then you can't do this. I mean, it's just, since when did the courts become a suicide pact for America? It's just unbelievable. It really is. There needs to be, and you wonder, the standard conventional wisdom answer is, there's got to be a comprehensive immigration reform. We need to change the laws. Yeah, we need to change the laws, but then you're going to have the courts come in and reinterpret the laws anyway. I mean, the whole thing is just, it's getting out of hand. These courts are getting out of hand.
Let me give you another law that another ruling.
We're beyond constitutional rule here, where the courts are unilaterally writing our laws.
Like in the Ninth Circuit, another another ruling they just made. There was a migrant from Somalia that claimed asylum, and in his first, he passed the first thing. He got a hearing, and it was rejected, as 90% of them are, as being a fraudulent claim. Well, he sued in the Ninth District, saying that he wanted to go in front of a judge. That was upheld, meaning that the Ninth Circuit Court said you have a constitutional right, although you're not a citizen, to get in front of a judge. Well, that would clog the system up for 100 years, right? Now you got to get a judge to go in front of every single person. I mean, the insane rulings are just crazy. All right, I want to get your reaction here. I'm going to switch a minute. I want to get your reaction to Joe Biden and these Me Too allegations coming out. And I'm going to start by playing, Kara, for Curtis. Let's get up cut 6 here. This is former Jill Biden Chief of Staff Sheila Nix saying that Joe would be the ideal president for us in these times. And then I want to get your reaction to Creepy Joe's allegation here of a little behavior that seems to be out of step with where the Democrats are right now in some of this. Let's start with cut 6. This is Sheila Nix.
Well, I hope he does, because I think his level of experience and his commitment to the country over the last 4 years would make him just the ideal president for us, especially in these times. So I haven't, I don't know what his final decision is, but I'm hopeful that this won't in any way discourage him.
Well, Flores told Hallie Jackson today that Flores believes that this should be disqualifying.
Well, she should express her opinions, and people can listen to what she has to say. The vice president said he's open to listening to any conversations about all of these issues. But I personally don't believe it's disqualifying.
All right, Curtis, what do you make of Creepy Joe?
Well, I think Joe Biden has kissed his chances goodbye, so to speak.
Very good, Curtis. You were saving that one, right?
Kissed his chances at the presidency goodbye. The Democrats are just too they'll find this too exhausting. This is just going to be too much. It may be a convenient excuse, though, for him not to run, because if he runs, you're going to what's going to come out are all the creepy deals. Forget about how he smells women's hair or whatever he does, or gives them back rubs or shoulder rubs or rubs against them. I don't know what he does. But his kid, Hunter Biden, is a total crook, gets paid off by the Ukrainians, makes business deals with the Chinese. Joe Biden has been on the wrong side of every major issue. He has been in the bag for the Wall Street banks. He has been in the bag for the globalists. He was in favor of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, every free trade deal. He talks a game like he's a populist, like he's the working man's Joe Six-Pack, but he's a fraud. He's been in Washington for 50 years. This guy was first elected when he was 29 years old. He knows how to game the system. He shook down the Ukraine for millions of dollars, which was then paid to his son on a contract, on some kind of consulting contract. And his son was consulting on stuff he knows nothing about. This whole thing was an insider game. That's the real Joe Biden. Every time he's run for president, he has self-destructed. And I think this time the Democrats are just tired of all this. They're exhausted already. They had Bill Clinton, and then that all came back again 25 years later. And the last thing they need is Joe Biden, who's the establishment candidate. But interestingly enough, because Joe Biden is just out of gas right now, Bernie Sanders has now become the establishment candidate. He's the old wise one who's been in the Senate and has experience, and he ran before. It's an interesting transmogrification where I think Joe is a dead man walking. And, you know, the way he acts towards women and young girls and young boys and whatever, this overly familiar, it's like Uncle Joe. I don't think he has lust in his heart when he's doing that. But that's beside the point. There are plenty of other real reasons why he should be, why he's disqualified. And I don't think he's going to go anywhere.
I agree with you. I don't think he's going to run as a result of this stuff because he knows that this is going to continue to come out because he is kind of creepy. And also he's got all these positions that are out of step. But I also agree with your insightful analysis that Bernie Sanders is now, odd as this is now becoming the establishment candidate. Because when you look at the other people running against him, I mean, he's been there, he's sage, he's older, he's wiser. He's not, he's a socialist, but he's a known quantity, right? A lot of these people like this guy,
right. That's really so what we're saying about Joe Biden. Oh, he's a known quantity, right? He's been around. Well, now we know too much about Joe Biden, and his positions are out of step. And Bernie Sanders is a known quantity. He is now the stable, known quantity candidate.
Because you know what he's going to say, and you know what he's going to do. So let me ask you this: I'm predicting a lot of time. I'm predicting Sanders is going to be the Democratic nominee. What about you?
He could well be, and he's dangerous. Dangerous for President Trump. Bernie Sanders could. He would have a draw in Pennsylvania and Michigan and all those places that are must-win states.
You can't count him out. I've got to go. Curtis Ellis, thanks for being with us.